enmity gauged, united by fear, forced to endure what I could not forgive.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and you can find me on Twitter and on Instagram at redrock_bball and on Facebook at facebook.com/redrockbasketball. Here we are, the NBA playoffs have started. We had some great games, some thrilling finishes, some horrendously bad news or potentially horrendously bad news, some definitely bad news that went down and a horrible game. So we had the whole gamut of emotions. Great stuff, tragedy, on-court potential tragedy, great finishes. It was all dished up for us on this first day of the NBA playoffs. I'm going to do a quick, and this is what we do through the playoffs, I'm going to do a quick rundown of what actually went down on Saturday, not the full box score breakdown that we do during the regular season, because we're not talking about the fantasy values of waiver wire pickups and, you know, who should be traded and all that sort of stuff. We're not talking about any of that stuff. We just want to talk about the games and what went down and how we can use that information to help frame our thoughts for the next time that those teams go around. And then we'll talk about the preview for Sunday's games and look ahead to those 4 games to try and help you guys set your lineups. I know plenty of people listening to the podcast yesterday won some pretty significant cash on DFS on Saturday. So congratulations to all you guys who happened to do that. Well done. And hopefully we can do that for you guys again on this podcast. So
let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. But before we do, I do have to announce the winners of the Red Rock Listener Leagues, the Rotisserie Leagues, which finished at the end of the season. We did all the head-to-head announcements. We did all the Dynasty League announcements, but the Rotisserie Leagues go through to the end of the season, as is common with Roto, or as is standard with Roto Leagues to go through to the end of that season. So we've got all the winners to announce from all those 12 divisions. The winners of these leagues all go into the Roto Champions League next season with myself and with Matt Smith. We'll have a 14-team Roto Champions League to go with our 14-team head-to-head Champions League, and then all the feeder leagues will renew again for next season as well. The Antoine Walker division was won by Grand Theft Auto, who I believe won, or not I believe, I know, he won multiple other Red Rock Listener Leagues. He won the Judd Buechler Division 30-team salary cap dynasty league. He also won a head-to-head league, if I'm not mistaken. He won the Jermaine O'Neal head-to-head listener league as well. So we're going to be having Grand Theft Auto against us in the Champions League for head-to-head, in the Champions League for Roto, and he's the reigning champion in one of the 30-team dynasty leagues. So clearly, I would have to say, without looking too far into it, he is the number one listener of the year in terms of his fantasy output in these listener leagues. No one did as much as what Grand Theft Auto did. And Mr. Grand Theft Auto, I don't even know what your real name is. I probably should have looked that up if I even had that ability, but let me know. If you are Grand Theft Auto, please let me know. The Derek Fisher division was won by the Big Farlowski, so congratulations, Big Farlowski. Eric Dampier division went to Bad Guy Inc. John Wallace went to Point Giannis. Kerry Kittles went to Tsunami, and that is, I know who that is. That is William Sue, who does live here in Australia. So I think it's William. I hope I didn't make a mistake there. Congratulations to you. The Marcus Camby division, which was the division that myself and Matt were in this year, that was won by 416 Basketball, a big Raptors fan. So go and check out his Twitter account, which is 416 Basketball. He does a bit of Raptors writing as well. The Peja Stojakovic division was won by Tragic Mushrooms. Roy Rogers was won by Kip Brisket. Stefan Marbury by Team Archie Trance. The Tony Delk division was won by Team The Mailman 4. The Vitaly Potapenko division was won by the Mud Skippers. And the Zadrunas Ilgauskas division was won by Pippin Ain't Easy. So congratulations to all you guys. When we renew the leagues, which I'm not even sure when I'll do that, I'll probably do it through May or June just to get them set up nice and early. You'll all get invites through to the Champions League for next season. So congratulations on your success for this year. Let's take a look at what actually went down on Saturday with these 4 games, and we start with the first one of those, and that is the Indiana Pacers and the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavs get the victory by 1 point in the end. The Pacers missing a game-winning shot by CJ Miles. And plenty of you ask me, "Yeah, why do you hate Paul George so much? Why are you so anti-Paul George?" I'll tell you why I'm anti-Paul George, because I think he's a dickhead. I think he's a decent basketball player. I just think he is not a great bloke. And there are numerous things to back that up. But even his comment today after the game, when CJ Miles took that wide open three-pointer to try and win the game, Paul's like, "Oh, I spoke to CJ after the game and told him he's got to give the ball to me so I can take the last shot." Like, mate, CJ Miles is wide open. This is not... And a lot of people defend, "Oh, yeah, that's what Kobe would say. That's what MJ would say." Yeah, Kobe would say it. He'd also miss so many times in those last second situations, which again goes back to our positive bias a lot of the time when we remember the positives. Like when I talk about revenge games and things like that, you can talk about Kobe as being this great clutch player and he always wanted the shot. He just missed it so many times that we forget about that and think that as soon as Kobe's getting the last second shot, it's going in. So that mentality, CJ Miles was wide open. Paul George had the ball. He got doubled. He made the right play. He passed it off. Miles was open. He took a shot. It missed. That's exactly what needed to happen. And Paul George coming out, and not only, you can go and say that to CJ, and you could say it to the coaching staff, fine. You come off like a dickhead in the locker room, which just fuels further my thoughts on this guy. But then to come out publicly and say it, "I told CJ he had to get the ball back to me." This is why I don't like Paul George and I don't value him as this great franchise asset. Because he can be as good as he wants on the court, which he does at times, but he doesn't always bring it. But this attitude is, to me, what holds him back. Now, he was fantastic. There's no denying what he did in this game. 29, 5, and 7 in 41 minutes with 6 triples is a huge performance. And yeah, he kept this team as close as they were. But it's still these little things of immaturity that is not ever sure that he's ever going to get past them, to be honest. Now, the interesting thing we see in these first games of the playoffs is how rotations actually go down and how things happen. And teams were using much larger rotations than I expected. We saw 10 players used by the Pacers. I wasn't expecting a 10-man rotation, but what we did see that was interesting is we saw a lot of Lance Stevenson. 27 minutes for Lance, and he had 16, 7, and 3. Now, he was shooting the ball extraordinarily well. 62% shooting is great from Lance, but the fact that they're so comfortable using him in that big role, that meant that they didn't use Jeff Teague as much. They didn't use Thaddeus Young as much. They only saw 32 minutes of Miles Turner, and we had Monte and Lance both playing 28 and 27 minutes respectively. So that is an interesting wrinkle in that rotation. We also saw 4 minutes of Lavoie Allen, which I'm not sure is really necessary in any situation, and Kevin Seraphin getting the bulk of those backup big man minutes. He played 16 minutes. So that's the big interesting takeaway there for me. Miles Turner was okay. I think he will struggle scoring-wise against this Cavs team. And he can struggle a little bit defending guys like Fry and Love if he is forced into that situation. But otherwise, most of it sort of panned out as we anticipated. I just didn't think that Lance would necessarily get so big a run, nor did I think that 10 guys would actually get into the game and into the rotation. The Cavs ran a 9-man rotation with their bench consisting of Kyle Korver, Darren Williams, Dick Jefferson, and Channing Frye. I wasn't sure that Jefferson would play really much at all, but he played 18 minutes, the most out of any of the bench players, so that's something to remember. He doesn't do anything with those minutes, but he got them. LeBron played 43, Kyrie played 39, so the big studs playing the big minutes. LeBron 32, 6, and 13, and Kyrie 23, 3, and 6. Kevin Love, we've seen this from Ty Lue before, limiting what Love does, only playing him 31 minutes, and Tristan Thompson, only 31 minutes from him as well. I guess some of that's to do with the Cavs, not the Cavs, with the Pacers having Young as that power forward, who's not a big man necessarily. He plays power forward, but he's not a big, lumbering, hulking big man, and he can move quite well on the perimeter, and that might be impacting what they do with their rotations as well, playing Jefferson those extra minutes, playing him at the 4, playing Channing Frye, just to try and counter that. But otherwise, the majority of the stuff was fairly much spot on from what we expected from the Cavs, but another huge performance from LeBron, and he was the number 1 overall player on the day with his performance. Milwaukee and Toronto, this is the series that I did pick as the upset, and it started off pretty well for my prognosticating abilities as the Bucks get the upset victory in Game 1 against Toronto. I guess you shouldn't be surprised. Toronto, I believe, has lost 9 straight Game 1s in playoff series. And again, questionable coaching happens, and it was always going to happen in a game where Jason Kidd is facing off with Dwayne Casey. Just questionable rotational decisions. Kidd used 11 players in the first half. You're in a playoff situation, Jason. You're supposed to be tightening your rotation. In the end, he used every player on his active roster, apart from John Henson, which again is just a massive curveball that he continually does. Just he has no long-term plan, no long-term vision with anything he's doing. It changes all the time. Like, why bring Henson back in from his thumb injury and play him 20 minutes if then you're going to take him out of the rotation in the playoffs? Why not just keep him out for those last 2 regular season games and keep Spencer Hawes in there for whatever reason? You don't need to play 3 centers at all, let alone Spencer Hawes, but he got the win. It's still, my thoughts on Kidd, he's done well. He's done very well to get the team to where they are, but he continually holds them back with baffling decisions. I thought Thon McCurr played well. He only played 15 minutes, but to me, with the way that he was playing, especially in the second half, I don't need to see 7 minutes of Spencer Hawes. I can see those 7 minutes either go to McCurr or go to Greggy Munro, who had 14 and 15 in 26 minutes. Surely 30 minutes of Munro, 18 minutes of McCurr is enough for your centre without getting a token 7 minutes to Spencer or getting 6 minutes to Mick Beasley or getting 9 minutes to Jason Terry. Like, this stuff is not necessary. Not necessary. Even 6 minutes to Mirza Teletovic. Like, you're running, he in essence ran a 7-man rotation with Munro playing 26 off the bench, with Daly playing 32 off the bench. But then you got 4 guys playing single digits in minutes, and I'm not even including the 2 minutes of junk time that Rashad Vaughn played. I don't know whether he'll tighten it up, but 11-man first half playoff rotation is a very weird situation, especially when you keep John Henson out of it entirely. As for Yanni, he was unstoppable, and I reckon that's going to be a problem. Damari Carroll had no hope. Yeah, PJ Tucker, he's a great defender. He's got no hope against Yanni. Yanni nailed about 7 dunks, it felt like. He had 28, 8 and 3 with 2 steals and a block. He was doing everything, and Broggo looked fantastic. 34 minutes. I can't believe it took this long for Brogdon, or not this long, as long as it did for Brogdon to be entrenched in a big role. I was calling for it from whenever Chris Middleton went down. You've got to give these minutes to Brogdon. But finally, it's here, and he's locked into these minutes. 16 and 6 with 4 triples. When he got one of those open shots for 3, you just went, this is going in. And it went in. And that's exactly part of how they beat this team. Chrissy Middleton struggled. He did dish 9 assists, though. So he did the defensive things. He did the passing things. And he enabled and allowed guys like Brogdon to step up and take that role. Well, Dellavedova had 11 points in his 32 minutes. I'm not sure that he will get 32 each night. Some of that will go to Teletovic, some of that will go to Terry, some of that might go to Beasley. So I'm not sold on Daly playing 31 a night. I still would like to see more Munro. He needs to play more and more McCurr. We just don't need to see Spencer Hawes at all. Now, as for the Raptors, DeMar DeRozan played 39 minutes, pretty much as expected. Kyle Lowry played 34. Now, he did have some foul trouble, and that limited him in this one. He was in his playoff best, and by that I mean he went 2 of 11 for 4 points. This has been the problem with Kyle Lowry. As soon as the calendar hits February, Kyle Lowry just goes in the tank. It just happens all the time. And when it gets to the playoffs, it gets worse. He needs to obviously shake this off, and he will. He'll have some good games, but it is a consistent pattern from Kyle Lowry of shitfulness in the playoffs and in the second half of the year. 4 points in 34 minutes is never going to cut it. DeRozan had 27 and 8 at the start of the game. Nobody could stop him. They shut him down in the end, and he finished up shooting just 33%, while Serge Ibaka had one of his best games, 19 and 14, with 3 blocks in 36 minutes. My fear on Jonas Valanciunas was realised. He only played the 24 here, 9 and 9, and they ran with a lot of Ibaka at centre, which is, again, it's fine to me to do that. And I wasn't too bothered by Casey's rotations in this game. What we saw out of him was pretty much par for the course of what's to be expected. PJ Tucker got 29. Corey Joseph, following on from that end of the season, played 27, backup point and at backup 2. So he's getting a lot of those minutes. And Damari Carroll just the 24 as a starter because he's not good, as I've said many, many times. We had a lot of junk time guys get in. Jakob Poeltl, Delon Wright, Bebe Nogueira, Fred VanVleet. They all played in the last minute of the game. We also had a 6-minute cameo from Norm Powell. I don't think that Powell gets on the court every night. We're going to get lots of DeRozan, lots of Ibaka, lots of Joseph, and lots of Lowry and Tucker. They're going to be the 5 highest minutes guys, I reckon, for the Raptors moving forward. And in this sort of a matchup against the Bucks, I reckon Valanciunas is in a little bit of trouble, and he won't get up at 20s in minutes most of the time. But a huge win for the Bucks nonetheless. The Grizzlies and the Spurs, really, this was a smashing. It started off in the opposite direction as the Grizzlies took advantage of the Spurs early. And went, okay, what's going on here? But then you realise that a team starting Wayne Selden's probably not going to be able to get over the line against the Spurs, and the Spurs ended up winning by 29 points. Selden started. He played 27 minutes. There is no excuse in my mind for Selden starting. I don't care that he played 27 minutes a game down the stretch. They weren't good games. He hasn't been good. He wasn't good in New Orleans. There is no excuse for him to play that many minutes. He had 5 and 3 in that time. Well, Jim Ennis played just the 20. He did stuff defensively, Ennis, but to me, he should be getting the bulk of these minutes, or even Andy Harrison, who had 10 points, but his plus-minus was atrocious. It wasn't as bad as Zach Randolph's. It was about a minus 75, it felt like. In his 26 minutes, he will be better than that, while Marc Gasol really the only shining light, having 32 and 5. Even Mike Conley really struggled to score, but did add the 7 dimes and 3 steals. This is going to be a struggle for the Grizzlies without Parsons, obviously, and without Tone Allen. When you're playing JaMychal Green and Vince Carter and Wayne Selden as 3 of your starters, it's not great, and I think that's going to remain the case. Because of the blowout nature of this game, we saw Wade Baldwin play 7 minutes, Deontay Davis play 7, Brandon Wright, Jarrell Martin, they all got minutes. And the same thing over at the Spurs, where Davis Bertans and Bryn Forbes, and we got 17 minutes of Kyle Anderson and 14 minutes of John Simmons. And guys like Dan Green, who was on fire, he had just 2 points, but in true Danny Green style, had 4 blocks and a steal. His defense was absolutely important, but that's not a good phrase, but you know what I'm trying to say. It was amazingly necessary in that early part of the game for Green to do what he did, blocking shots, swiping steals, really being a presence on that end. And he showed Wayne Selden, look, I'll show you who's boss here, mate. And he only played the 20 minutes. Tone Parker only played 22 and scored 18. So getting a meaningful gauge on this rotation is pretty tough, just given the blowout nature. But I did like what we saw from Kyle Anderson. To me, he still remains the better option over John Simmons. The last game of the night, what a game this was. The Utah Jazz, on the very first play of the game, Rudy Gobert out, knee sprain. Now, for those of you who didn't follow me on Twitter, I have been tweeting a few things out about it. A couple of things we need to know. A sprain is a generic term. Oh, it's just a knee sprain. That doesn't cut it. That's not accurate. A sprain is a tear in a ligament. So you know what else is a sprain? An ACL tear, an MCL tear. They're sprains. They're just really bad ones, but they're sprains. His x-rays were negative. That's great. That means there's no broken bones. That's not what any of us care about in this situation. We want to know the MRI results. And he was going to have MRIs right after the game. Now I'm going to go check the news now to see if anything has actually gone down with Gobert. Just got a tweet just now from Jody Genesee that says Rudy Gobert was in good spirits and walking on his own with a slight limp at halftime, according to Rocket Rodney Hood. The Rocket put in there is by me. So that's good news. Also, Mark Spears tweeted out not long ago that the sources indicated to him that the ACL and the MCL appear fine. That's not him out of the woods. There could be patella involved. There could be a PCL involved. There could be meniscus potentially involved as well. So he's not completely out of the woods, but going by what Spears said, ACL and MCL, and they know these things because they can do the touch test on them, and generally that's fine. So if that whisper's coming out that that's fine, then that's good news. But you would have to think that this puts Gobert in jeopardy for game 2, and probably at least the next week would be my guess. But the Jazz, without their most important player, not necessarily their best player, but probably their most important player, they got the victory on the road in game 1. It is a massive victory for them. It is a horrendous loss for the Clippers. Blake Griffin went missing down the stretch, scored 2 points from free throws in the fourth quarter. That is it. Completely a non-factor. And I just want to talk you through my thoughts on the end of this game, because you know how vociferous an opponent I am of late game fouls and timeouts. And this wasn't a late game foul, let's play the free throw game situation, which I was absolutely abhor. But this was a situation, I hate late game, I hate timeouts. Give each team one for a game. That's it. That's all I want. One timeout. Nothing else. Quinn Snyder has a pattern, and he has done this before, and I think he did it earlier this season on a Rocket Rodney Hood game winner. When there's 20 seconds left, he doesn't call a timeout. And you know why that's good? Well, it's great and tell me, any of you watching the end of that game, don't tell me it wasn't way more exciting to see the Jazz get it after a made basket, that Chris Paul layup, and just go down and play, rather than sit around for a minute as the coaches get their whiteboards out, adjust their balls for 5 seconds, write stuff on it, and the players come out all set up. Stuff happening in chaos is a great indicator to me of talent and composure, not in a half-court, pre-drawn-up setup. I love how Quinn Snyder does it. It keeps the defense on their toes, or on their heels, maybe. That's a better way of putting it. Because they had Joe Johnson on Jamal Crawford. Crawford wouldn't have been in there for defense. They would have put someone else in there and try to get that switch as they wanted to. It puts the defense completely back on their heels. And that really benefits what the offense can do. So Johnson takes it, dribbles down, takes the inbound pass, dribbles down the whole court, attacks on Jamal, drives, lays it in, bounces off the rim a couple of times, goes in, time expires. Fantastic. This is what all coaches should do. I hate the timeouts. They need to be gone out of the game. They are bullshit. They're useless. They're not, because if you didn't have them, you wouldn't even care that they weren't there. Because you get more sort of finishes like this, which actually relies more upon one-on-one player combat rather than scheming and time waste and all this other bullshit that goes into it. I was super happy, and I love the way that Quinn Snyder approaches it. I wish I could get some sort of discussion on it from him, and I will attempt to do that. But I love his theory on that, and it's for the benefit of us watching, and honestly, it's for the better of his team. It works. Timeouts help the defense more than they help the offense, but coaches don't necessarily realize that. As smart as they are and as much about basketball as they know, timeouts help the defense more than the offense, and we saw it here. This is exactly what needed to happen, and it happened, and it was glorious. Sorry, Clippers fans, but I just love when things that I campaign for actually turn up, and I've got some contacts in the Jazz organization that I'm happy for those guys too. So as for Joe, he played 31 minutes. He had 21, 3 and 3, had 3 triples and 3 steals. An absolute monster of a performance from Joe. Yeah, Gordy Hayward broke the shackles of Luke Marmute for 19 and 10. One of his better performances against the Clippers because he does struggle there. Derek Favors stepped up. He played 32 minutes. So the talk of Favors being 100% healthy, I guess I've got to take him at his word for it. Now, he still didn't start. I would like to see him and Gobert, if Gobert was there, starting together. But now you would have to think that Favors goes in and becomes the starting center. He was able to withstand the 32 minutes, and he played well. That is huge for the Jazz to actually fill that hole of Gobert being out. Rocket only played the 19 minutes, had 8 points. Yeah, it's not great for him, obviously. Well, Jingling Joe played 33 and he started. And I think that Ingles is going to continue to start for the rest of this series for what he can do on the wing. His defense, he pissed off Chris Paul. He can pass. He was fantastic in this game as well. Ingles, Georgie Hill stepped up too and scored 16 points. So great stuff there from the Jazz to get that victory. Another upset on the cards. On to the Clippers side of things, Chrissy Paul was great, 25, 7 and 11 with 3 steals, and Griffin had 26 points, but as I said, just completely a non-factor in the fourth quarter. While DeAndre Jordan did the bulk of the defensive stuff with 15 boards and 3 blocks, and as per usual, the Clippers, he had nothing else. Weirdly, JJ Redick just wasn't in the game. He just didn't play. He only played 27 minutes, and it took until right at the end for him to actually come back in, and he scored some points, but it was just weird to see him not out there as much as he needed to be, and Jamal Crawford to play more minutes than him, and Crawford's toast. He offers way more negatives than he offers in terms of positives. And that's really about it for this Clippers team. They played 3 minutes of Paul Pierce for whatever reason. I have absolutely no idea. There is no reason that Paul Pierce should be taking the court at all, especially when you've got an Allen Anderson who is not great, but he's better than Paul Pierce. Or Wes Johnson, who is miles and miles and miles better than Paul Pierce. It's a curious coaching decision to get Pierce out. Now, the 3 minutes probably didn't cost him the game, but maybe it did. There's no reason that Paul Pierce should be out on the court there at all. Interesting for the Jazz, to go back to them, Dante Exum did not play at all. We had Shelvin Mack as the backup point guard ahead of Exum, and Jeff Withey put in some nice minutes as Derek Favors as backup at center. But it was the absence of Gobert that enabled Johnson to play as many minutes as he did, and he was absolutely superb for that team. Let's get a couple of questions that I see here. Andre Paula says, the backlash after the Cavs-Pacers game was giving me a mind sprain. What backlash? What backlash were you hearing? The backlash against Paul George? Is that what you're talking about, Andre? Let me know. And Jason Gunnister says, only call a timeout if less than 5 seconds left is how I see it. Yeah, I can totally see that. If you got like 2 seconds left and you need a timeout to advance it to half court, understand that. I don't like the rule of a timeout advancing it to half court. That's a completely different situation, but it would make total sense to call that timeout if you've got, say, 2 seconds left to move it from the baseline to half court. That makes sense. I hate that rule anyway, but that makes sense. But yeah, look, getting that momentum and the chaos that's caused by running down the court that way is so much better than an inbounds play, as I have mentioned plenty of times Let's now talk about what the perfect DFS lineup was from Saturday's action. On FanDuel, Tone Parker put up 23.4. He was the best cheap point guard option out there because he did have that option of playing decent minutes and putting up good performances, as we've seen a few times from Parker this season. Chrissy Paul had 54.9. At shooting guard, it was Lance Stevenson at 28.9 and Yanni at 47.1. The small forwards, LeBronald 61.7 and Joe Johnson at 36.1. And at power forward, Serge Ibaka 40.8 and Derek Favors 25.2. And at center, Marc Gasol had 44. And the total was 362.1 for a total of 59,400. On DraftKings, Kyrie, 41.25. His salary was fantastic on DraftKings, and that's why he was a great option over there. Tone Snell had 22, LeBronald had 66, Serge had 44, and Gasol had 46.25. And then we rounded it out with Chrissy Paul at 57.75, Lance at 29.25, and Joe Johnson at 38.25 for a total of 344.75, and that cost the full $50,000. Now I see we've got a question in here from Thomas Dillon, who says, why did Gobert not play? Sorry, I'm a late viewer here. Gobert sprained his knee in the first 17 seconds of the game, Thomas. That's why he did not play, because he hurt his knee, and we are awaiting his status to see what actually is the damage to his knee. And we've got some news here. Rudy Gobert has a hyperextension and a bone bruise in his injured knee. So that's that comes from Shams Charania and from Mark Spears, saying that is the injury. I would have to think that is going to cost him some time. We saw Favors have knee bone bruise this year that cost him 4 or 5 weeks. Hyperextensions, they will. It's a stretching of the ligaments. It's the knee bending in the wrong direction too far. It's extending too far. So I would be shocked if he plays in Game 2, and I think that probably Game 3 is going to be a stretch for Gobert at this point, or if he does play, he is going to be really, really struggling. So that is the current news on the Gobert situation. Luke Smith says, Chris Paul will leave for the Spurs, right? He looked all alone out there in the fourth quarter. I'm not sure about the Spurs. But yeah, you would have to feel that someone is leaving the Clippers. It was just a nightmare at the end of that game, and he played fantastic, but no one else could do anything to help at all. Really weird situation. I will keep checking up to any more information here on Gobert, but we don't have any timeline on this, but there is no structural damage as such. So that is a good news, but yeah, Game 2, I would be stunned if he is playing at this point. But I guess we will have to wait and see. And when I hear more information on that, I will talk about it. Let's go on to the games for Sunday now. Easter Sunday action in the NBA. The first one of those is Atlanta and Washington. The Hawks injury report came out today. Dennis Schroeder and Kent Bazemore are both listed as probable. Schroeder with that foot problem, which cost him a game at the end of the year, and Bazemore with his knee. Again, a right knee bone bruise, which cost him some playing time. Again, we look at that as Gobert, and that's going to be a big impact on Gobert, because we saw how long it kept Bazemore out, and I was going to say he's still not back to his back to his best, but maybe he is. This is his best. So we check on the status of those guys, but they'll be fine to play. Now, the Hawks are going to continue starting Timmy Hardaway and Taurean Prince, with Tabo and Kent Bazemore coming off the bench. And if we remember back to the start of the year, that seems like a very weird situation, considering the Bazemore was the guy that they'd re-signed to this big money deal, and Tabo was playing quite a few minutes here with this team, and I think we had Korver and Bazemore as the starters, and then Korver lost his position, and Korver was traded, and Cephalosha and Bazemore. Now we've got Hardaway and Prince starting in the playoffs for the Hawks, but there's still a chance that all four of those guys, probably less Hardaway, but more Prince, Cephalosha and Bazemore, all play 24, 26 minutes apiece until one guy really stands tall. And it could be a thing that changes game to game depending on how the game situation is actually going down. For the Wizards, no injuries to talk about at this point, apart from Jan Mahinmi, who doesn't look like he's going to be playing. The Wizards are favored by 5, as I mentioned. The total is 209 points, so a pretty decent total. It's the third highest of the day. We had all these low totals on Saturday, and we've got really some big ones on this, with Portland Golden State and Oklahoma City Houston both having a total of over 220, which is obviously a pretty significant Difference to the 190 that we had today for Utah and the Clippers, and the 199 I think that we had for the Spurs and the Grizzlies. We're talking a lot more fantasy points that could be potentially coming our way with Sunday's action. Now, as for Mahinmi, I did mention that, but he is out for the first 2 games of this series at least, so that does open up some value on this team. So let's stop talking shit and let's actually one more thing. John Tiet says the Knicks situation keeps getting juicy. Man, I'm going to talk about this for ages, John. I will talk about it. No, I don't even know. But all I say about this, I think I talked about it on yesterday's podcast. Go and read Woj's article about Porzingis. And just read it. It is remarkable. And you can say, all right, it's Phil Jackson's fault, a lot of this. But it goes back to Dolan. The fact that you extended him 2 years puts all culpability back onto Dolan. And the fans do not deserve it, but Dolan does. If you're putting that if you're putting the onus back on Phil Jackson to do this, then it's all his fault. That's as simple as that. All his fault. It doesn't get any further. Jackson's a dick. He is an absolute cock at the moment, and I love Phil Jackson. Yeah, obviously he's a Bulls fan. He was huge for me. He's a bad executive. He's lost touch with what he needs to do. And the Woj article is scathing, and you do need to read it. And it makes complete sense, everything that he said in there. And man, Porzingis, shit, it's not good if you're a Knicks fan at all. Let's talk Hawks, Wizards. Now, Andre Paula says, is that a Pinterest t-shirt? It's the exact same thing that Ben said to me when I first wore this t-shirt. Yeah, you got a Pinterest t-shirt. It's not. It just looks exactly like a Pinterest t-shirt. It's got the P up the top. I don't even know what the P stands for. I don't even know what brand it is, but it's not a Pinterest t-shirt unless Pinterest wants to sponsor me and send me t-shirts and I'll wear their t-shirt. But no, it is not a Pinterest t-shirt that I'm wearing. At point guard, Johnny Wall, 10,100. We have to love the matchup against the Hawks. They've been a gold mine for point guards all season, and I don't really see a huge amount changing here. So Wall's at 10,100. Yes, it's quite a big amount of cash, clearly, but it doesn't mean that he should be steered clear of. And at 9,700 on DraftKings, I absolutely love it. He's averaging 46 DraftKings points the last 3 times against Atlanta. He's going to be pushing a huge amount of minutes unless it becomes a blowout, which I'm not all that worried about in this one. It's got the lowest spread of all of the games. So I do like John. I like him on both sites, both FanDuel and DraftKings. Now, as for Schroeder, he gets the matchup that is John Wall, and that's not ideal. He has struggled against the Wizards with a 20-point average on FanDuel across the last 3 games, and he costs 7,200. Now, Schroeder can put up the big numbers. We've seen it before. He had a 50-point game just a few games ago. But against John Wall, it's a different situation. It's a different story, so I can't see Schroeder being some sort of great option here in this matchup. We're not going to care about Malcolm Delaney. I don't think that Delaney or Calderon, really, they might not even see the rotation, because we have seen Budenholzer plenty of times this season use Tim Hardaway as a point guard and use Kent Bazemore as a point guard. And if you're going to run solid minutes for Hardaway, Prince, Cephalosha, and Bazemore, having one of them handle point guard duty for 10 minutes, 8 minutes, or split it, 5 Hardaway, 5 Bazemore, is going to get those guys minutes up, and you're not going to have Delaney out there who he's lost trust with, or Calderon, who's a terrible defender, and he's going to get destroyed by Johnny Wall. So I don't think that those guys play, if really at all. Shooting guards, Brattles, 7,500 for Beal. It's not a bad price. It's not the best. I like him on DraftKings more at 7,200. A little bit more value there in Beal, but I think it's pretty solid. Well, Timmy Hardaway at 55. I actually like that for Hardaway. I think that he has shown an increased reliability. He's going to get the most minutes out of all 4 of those wings. Of that, I am almost 100% certain. And I think he is going to be. I think he's going to be worthwhile at that $5,500 price point. At 56 on DraftKings, he doesn't strike me as the greatest shooting guard on the board, but I do like it on FanDuel where he's at 55. For the small forwards, Otto Porter. I don't know what to do with Scott Brooks and Porter. We saw down the last 2-3 weeks of the season that Porter was getting, instead of 36 minutes a night, he was getting 24 minutes a night. And yes, he had some back issues, but I don't think that was all it. I think it was a increased trust in Kelly Oubre and a little bit of drop in form from Otto Porter. So I wouldn't be expecting Porter to go back and play 35, 36 minutes. Now his salary's come down to $5,000, so that should be appealing, but it's not. To me, with everyone healthy on the Wizards, we know that he comes in as like the 5th option in that starting 5. And then if he's going to play 24 minutes, it's not a good spot. Tarbo, Bazemore, Prince. If I'm taking a punt on one of those guys, I would take Prince, just because I think that his ability to play at the 4 a little bit too is going to help him, maybe get the most minutes out of that trio. So I don't mind Prince, but he's strictly going to be just sort of a punting type option. You can look at Bazemore as well. He'd be the guy over Cephalosha at 4,100. He's a little bit more appealing, especially considering on DraftKings, Prince is up to 4,700, which is just a little bit too high for me over there with him. Bojan Bogdanovic with Oubre, with Porter. Bogdanovic might be that guy that gets minutes occasionally and goes off. We've seen that plenty of times, and that impacts what Oubre and Porter can do. But you only want to try that as a multi-lineup tournament sort of a guy. Markeith at power forward, 5,500 for Morris. I like him at that price. He's ready to go. He's back. He's got a good record against Atlanta. They allow decent points for power forwards. I'm fine with using him, especially now as well with Mahinmi out. Morris is going to play at centre sometimes, so that's going to help him there as well. So at 5,500, I like Markeith. He's at 5,000 on DraftKings, and to me, that is really tasty. Paulie Millsap at 7,500 had struggled a lot this season, really, and coming off that knee problem. I'm not fully into Millsap at 7,500, and I'm not really feeling anything with Ersan Ilyasova. At centre, Marcin Gortat's form has dropped, and he's dropped a lot. But with Mahinmi out, we saw at the start of the season with Mahinmi out, we're getting 36 minutes of Marcin Gortat. Now, I'm not sure we get 36, but I reckon we push 30. Yes, they can run Markeith and they can run Jason Smith, but I think we're going to see a lot of Marcin going up against his former mentor, Dwight Howard. I think we're going to see a bit of Marcin, and at 4,800, I really like that. At 41 on DraftKings, that is, to me, as core as it gets, Marcin Gortat at 4,100. Dwighty Howard, 7,400 for Dwight. Decent record against the Wizards. Not a bad spot, but if I'm picking a center, I'm picking Gortat and saving that $3,000 and using it maybe on Jim Harden, maybe on Russ, maybe on Johnny Wall, maybe on Steph, maybe on KD, rather than spend up and take that extra money on Dwight Howard when I can put $3,000 in the bank and get those other players that I really want. So I don't mind Dwight, but I'm also not really feeling it's like going to be a massive fan of him in this situation. Golden State and Portland is the next game we'll take a look at. The Warriors are favored by a monstrous 14.5, and the total is also big. It's 220. Matt Barnes is out. Kevon Looney is out. Alan Crabb is playing, and weirdly, Yusuf Nurkic is questionable. So we might see Big Nurk ready to go. Obviously, if Nurkic plays, well, not obviously, but I would imagine if Nurkic plays, he's not playing 35 because he's coming back from a broken leg and he's a giant man. And playing a giant man with no match practice at all on a broken leg, playing him big minutes is negligent. So I reckon if he plays 30, but not 37, 38, which is what he would normally see, I would think. So you're going to see a little bit of extra Noah Vonleh and maybe some Myers Leonard. But if Nurkic is going to be fully healthy, I'm not sure how much actual Leonard we see, because he is going to get destroyed by the Warriors defensively. He's going to get killed. Imagine if they have to put Draymond onto him. Like, forget it. Draymond running at center, like if he has to switch onto Kate, like it's over. So he is going to really struggle in this series. So if Nurkic is out, he'll get some minutes, but he's not going to be able to push 33 or 34 or even stay on the court in that situation. So if we have Yusuf out, I think what we see is Vonleh and Aminu playing a majority of the minutes at the 4 and 5. Harkless plays a little bit more at the 4. We get more Crabb, more Evan Turner. And Myers won't be playing 35 a night if Nurkic is out, in my opinion. For Timmy Quarterman is also questionable with a concussion. There is no way that Tim Quarterman sees the court regardless of his concussion standing. Let's talk point guards, and we've got to start with Steph. He is at $9,000. Good upside for Steph at that low price, but obviously the blowout nature is a real factor here because, he might only see 29 minutes. That's a real issue. Now, I don't necessarily think that he will, but that's a risk. And at 87 on DraftKings, he looks tasty too, but there are some other good point guard options out there like John Wall or like Russ against the Rockets, who are almost guaranteed to play big minutes as opposed to Steph in this situation. We want to talk Damian Lillard. He's at 9,400. His last game that he played, he dropped 77 points. So it was a fairly significant performance from Lillard in that game. I would expect it. Well, he's got 50-point upside. There's no doubt about that at 9,400. So he does become an elite tournament option. But the thing is, and I wouldn't be adverse to this because I think if Lillard goes off and has a big night, Steph's going to have to stay in the game more. So putting both those guys as your point guards or into your same lineup, yes, it's going to cost you 18,000 plus. But get your Gortats in there, get your Torian Prince or your Timmy Hardaway as a cheaper shooting guard, and you'll see there's some other cheaper options on some of the other games that you might be able to throw in as well. But if those two go off in a tournament, you're stacking them together with such a high over-under, it could really work in your advantage. I'm not feeling Lillard as a cash game play, as I really haven't felt him in that role for the majority of this season. Sean Livingston, not much to see there. At shooting guard, CJ is at 6,800. He does well against the Warriors in general. I like him. I don't feel all that strongly about him, though. And at 7,000 at DraftKings, I'm not super into that. While Klay Thompson, with Durant back, with Curry there, he goes back to that role he was in at the start of the season. And that's the guy that sometimes has 12 points, sometimes has 30 points, and very, very unpredictable, and becomes a tournament option only at 7,000. But I would rather take CJ McCollum than Klay Thompson pretty much every day of the week, unless I'm looking to differentiate in tournaments, which is a fine way to do it. The blue swimmer, Alan Crabb, is at $4,000. We know what he can do if he gets hot. The last time that he played, he dropped 40 points, or 41 points on DraftKings. But he also can go out there and have 10. And so at 4,100, he is in the Bojan Bogdanovic class of GPP cheap options, and that's fine. If you want to do that and have Crab, Lillard, Curry, that's a good way of saving that money to put those two big name guys in there at point guard and really differentiating yourself from the guys who go with Westbrook, which I imagine will be a fairly large chunk of people. At small forward, Andre Iguodala is down to 4,200. You would have to think that Iguodala gets 30 minutes. It's a playoffs. They ramp up his role. And he had been putting up good performances, but with Kevin Durant back, he doesn't have to do as much. So I'm not really feeling great about Iguodala. I don't think he's got massive upside there, but he's a solid play at that sort of salary. As for KD, 9,800 on FanDuel is all right. 8,800 on DraftKings is very good. He had 52 the last time that he played in only 27 minutes. 8,800, I don't see Evan Turner or Mo Harkless or even Al-Farouq Aminu really doing a huge amount to slow down KD. So at 8,800, it's really tough to go past him, but you do have that same risk, that same blowout risk of them saying, all right, KD's got a sore knee, 30 minutes, mate, you're done. We're up, it's over. And that's a real possibility here as well. And that sort of extends to the majority of this game. Al-Farouq Aminu at 5,100. If Nurkic is out, I think Aminu gets a significant boost, and he has had some big games against the Warriors. So I would really like using him at that sort of a salary if Nurkic is out. But if Nurkic plays, it's a little bit harder to use Aminu, especially if they run him off the bench, which is what I would imagine they do. With the power forwards, Draymond at 6,800, very, very cheap price for Draymond, 69 for him on DraftKings.
Giggity.
I like him more on DraftKings than I do on FanDuel. And I think he can be used on both sides. At power forward, Noah Vonleh is at 4,200. I would smash Vonleh if Nurkic is out. Just smash him. He's at 4,200. He had 37 in the last game. He averaged 29 in his last three. He can put up a stinker, but as I said with Myers Leonard and the issues, I think you're going to have Vonleh playing 30 minutes, maybe grabbing 10, 14 boards against the Warriors team. That's not a great rebounding team, and that's really Vonleh's strength. So I can see him, if Nurkic is out, Vonleh being a solid option there. I didn't talk about Mo Harkless and Evan Turner. Harkless to me at 3,600 is a punt option, and he's a good cheap punt option. There aren't many of them around. At another power forward, a guy you have to consider, and this is really salary based, David West is at 2,400. That is ludicrously cheap. Just think at 2,400, if he gets 15 points, it's a massive smashing of his value. We're talking 6.5, 7x type of value. So in a tournament at 2,400, I love David West. If they give him 18 minutes, he should be able to get past that, no problem. That is a great cheap play to enable you to stack some of these other high-priced players into your lineup. Again, FanDuel hasn't gone with the below minimum pricing yet, while DraftKings has. So that is something that does change the value of these guys. At center, Pachulia, McGee, not interested in those guys. Nurkic at 7,500. I think that's too high for a guy that I think will be limited if he does play. So I'll probably be out on Yusuf Nurkic in this one. Let's go to the next game. We're going to talk about the Chicago Bulls, my Chicago Bulls, and the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics are favored by 6, and the total is 204.5. But before we get into the game, Obviously, my condolences, and on behalf of all of you, I send my condolences, or your condolences, out to Isaiah Thomas and his family. He lost his sister today in a car accident back in Washington. She died, unfortunately, and consequently, Isaiah Thomas's status for the game is up in the air. Now, initially it was said he's expected to play. Then that was sort of walked back a little bit, and speaking to his father saying, we're not sure what's going to happen. He had people flying into Boston to be with him from his family. We don't know what Thomas is going to do, but as often happens in this situation, there are two extreme ways that it can go. I don't think Isaiah Thomas is having an average game. He's either having a grief-fueled monster, a dedication to his sister China, perhaps, or he's having an absolute shithouse game where he can't concentrate and he is just off his game if he plays. So to me, that does make him a tough cash play, just because I think of that level of variance, emotional variance, is going to be a real thing. I don't know if he plays. If he doesn't play, obviously Marcus Smart gets a significant boost, as does Terry Rozier. Not sure that Rozier is going to be some sort of superb option, but on a DraftKings, he could, just because of that below minimum salary pricing that they are going with. But thoughts go out to Isaiah and his family, and whatever decision he makes, it's what's right for him. Whether he plays or not, you can't criticize him for playing. Whether he takes it off, you can't criticize him for not playing. You don't know how, or maybe you do, but you don't know how it affects him. You don't know what it's like losing a sibling a day before the game. You might have lost a sibling before, but you don't know how it impacts him personally. Whether playing for him is something to help him cope with it, continuing the normalcy of life, getting his mind off things, tributing, or whether he just can't go on. Whatever it is, it's going to happen, but I don't want to hear a negative, should have played, no love for the team. If that shit goes on, that's disgraceful. Or if he plays, where's his respect for his family? It's piss off. Leave him alone. Let him do what he needs to do. Our thoughts are with you, Isaiah. So let's talk about this game now and speak about it from a DFS point of view without sounding too clinical about Isaiah Thomas. We'll start with him. He's at 8,200 in a normal situation. I would love it at 8,200. I think it's a great spot. But given the news that we've heard now, it is hard to use him in cash, but I still do like the tournament upside in case that tribute factor does come into things and he goes off for one. And you feel like Thomas is one of those guys. If I had to lean one way, I'd feel like he is one of those guys that you can put in and he will come out, and this will be something that that lives with him forever as a milestone tribute. This one's for China sort of game. And I can just see that being what Thomas can do in that situation. So for a tournament, there is 60, 70 point upside maybe for Isaiah. He's matching up against Rajon Rondo. Jimmy Butler says he's going to guard him. It's not going to happen. If Butler can't guard him every time because he's just going to get worn down running through screens and trying to keep up with Isaiah, it's not going to work. So, Jimmy, you're not going to be able to guard him the whole time, and Isaiah's going to have a chance to go off. And he's got a relatively good record against the Bulls as well, so I do like him here. As for Rajon Rondo, how much revenge factor do you want to go in? National TV, in Boston, against the Celtics. Big game from Rondo? Maybe. I like him at $6,000. I think that's a really good salary for him on both DraftKings and FanDuel. And I would have to think that we're getting big minutes of Rondo, and that we're going to get some big production. I like him here on both sites, as he's at $6,000 on both sides. So I do like Rondo here, and that's not a phrase that I say too lightly. As for the backups, Marcus Smart's at 5,100. He's going to get a lot of minutes regardless. But if Thomas is out, 5,100 for Marcus Smart, you put that in the March and Gortat category of this is a core play to me. If that's what goes down, he's at 49 on DraftKings. It's at 49 on DraftKings. If Thomas plays, I like Smart. If Thomas is out, it is as locked in pretty much as anything can get. I won't really get too interested in Terry Rozier and Jaren Grant. I love what Jaren Grant can do, but at 3,900, I just don't think that Hoiberg's going to have the balls to play him minutes over Rondo when he potentially should. At shooting guard, Dwayne Wade at 6,000. We know his minutes are going to go up, but I'm not really ready to invest 6,000 on Dwayne Wade just at this point. At 59 on DraftKings, it's pretty much the same story to me for Wade, whereas I like Avery Bradley. He gets Dwayne Wade's defense, which is not a concern. He's at 5,800. He's been a little bit shaky, but I do like Bradley against this Bulls team to really break out of it. At 6,100 for Braddles over on DraftKings. I'm not as interested in it. But on FanDuel at that $5,800 price point, I do really like that. At small forward, Jay Crowder's at 6,000. Jimmy Butler, Jay Crowder matchup, that probably works in against Crowder a bit. I don't mind him at 59 on DraftKings just because there aren't many of the mid-price small forwards around. But I don't absolutely love him, especially on FanDuel. As for Jim, $10,000 for Butler. He's going to play 40 minutes. He's going to play 40 plus minutes. You would have to think he'd get close to that anyway. And the fact that they'll run him at point guard, that's going to limit what Jaren Grant can do also. So if I'm spending 10,000, it's a safer bet than say the 10 on Durant or the 10 on Steph, or close to 10 for those guys. I feel much better about Butler getting 50 points than about those guys staying in the game long enough to keep those numbers going. Paulie Zips is going to have a pretty big role, but he very rarely does much. And with everyone back, it's going to be tough for him, I think. At power forward, Nikola Mirotic, 5,800. He's been fantastic. We know that. He's averaging 29 over the last 5. I'm not totally into Mirotic in this one. I think he's more a tournament option. I would lean a little bit more towards cash just because it's Boston that he's going up against, and they do have issues in guarding power forwards. But so much of what Mirotic does is based on coaching, and that does make him somewhat of a risky pick at that high 5s. If he was low 5s, I'd feel much better about using Mirotic, but 58's a little bit worrisome. Amir Johnson, I have no interest, nor Bob Portis. At center, there aren't many cheap centers around, so a starting center like Robin Lopez at 5,000 in a positive matchup against Al Horford and the Celtics, I like it. I think you do have to consider using Robin. He's 48 on DraftKings there. Al Horford, 6,700. No, the Bulls recently have been quite tough for opposition centers to play against, and Horford's going to cop that. Here, I think you can find better centers in multiple other areas. Obviously, my man Kelly Olynyk is a good option if he gets the minutes. He averages 28 in the last 3 times against the Bulls. It has been in 30 minutes, so he's played extra playing time against Chicago. But at 4,300, he's going to have low ownership. So if you want to go into a tournament and get 7x value out of someone, Olynyk could be that guy. So just don't completely write that off as me being fanciful. Let's go to the last game of the night, which is the game I reckon that most of you want to watch, and that is the Oklahoma City Thunder taking on the Houston Rockets. Russ versus Jim. The Rockets are favored by 7, and the total is a monstrous 227.5 points. Injury-wise, the table Montrezl Harrell is probable with a migraine. I think it's probable he doesn't play, regardless of the migraine, while Dougie McDermott is probable with left knee soreness. Now, if it hadn't been for what I saw today, I would have said that McDermott's not going to play at all. We saw him before the injury to Alex Abrines hit. He was playing 3 minutes a night, and as rotations get tightened up, he was probably going to be left on the rotation whiteboard floor. But that's not what happened today. People were playing 10 guys, 11 guys. Like weird playoff rotations on this first day. So Doug might get his 5 minutes. I thought he might be out of the rotation, but I'm leaning towards him getting back and playing those minimal minutes if he's ready to go. At point guard, we start with Russ, of course, 13,500. It's a lot. It's not a bad option, of course. Pat Beverly is a good defender, clearly, but Russ has still scored 62 points in the last 3 games against the Rockets. Now, 62 points at 13,500 is not quite where it needs to be, but it's not far off, and on a day with a 4-game slate, it's pretty tough to go past Russ. You can go with the John Wall. You can take that Lillard-Curry type stack, but in cash, to me, I think you're looking at Wall, you're looking at Westbrook as your 2 point guard guys to really look at. He's at 13.8 on DraftKings, which knocks him down a little bit, but not too far. As for Beverly, he's one of the best cheaper point guards that's out there, 4,900 on FanDuel. He's had some big games recently, averaging 33 over the last 5, including a 49-point performance there. The Thunder do restrict opposition point guards to a significant degree, so it's only if you're looking to save that cash that I would look at Beverly. And at 54 on DraftKings, I'm not really interested in that at all. The shooting guards. Let's start with Jim. He is at 12,200. Andre Robertson bothers him. he averages just 46 points the last 3 times against the Thunder. So that's bothersome. So to me, I am not locking in Harden in cash just because if I'm spending my money, I can take Butler, I can take Wall, I can take Westbrook and feel more confident in them returning close to value. Whereas Harden, to me, is the guy that might go off and score 70 or he might get reduced to 40. And that's a really big difference at $12,000. So that's something that you do need to pay some level of attention to here with Jim in that matchup with Robertson. He's at 12,000 on DraftKings, which is a little bit better, but it's still, there is that element of risk with using Jim Harden. Not saying that he's a terrible option at all, of course. The Rockets shooting guards, Lou Williams and Eric Gordon, I would find it hard to use them in cash. I would feel better about using Gordon, but only marginally. And I think you can interchange those guys. And look, one guy is probably going to have a big game and the other won't, but knowing who it's going to be is going to be tough. I think that with the Thunder's defense, that it probably leads to Gordon being able to do a little bit more than what Lou Williams can do, but it's a little bit fluky. Now Lou is at 55 on DraftKings. That's a write-off. 5,000 for Eric Gordon is not it's not a super price, but yeah, I'd look to those guys more on FanDuel than I would on DraftKings. At small forward, Robertson weirdly averages 28 points in the last 3 games against Houston, which is weirdly high. At 3,800, if he gets to that, you'll love that. I just don't really envisage it, but it clearly happened. So I don't hate throwing Robertson into a tournament, especially because I think he's going to play big minutes because he's going to be matched up with Harden. And if Harden plays 40, then you're going to see 35 maybe out of Robertson. And that could enable him to have a decent game. So don't completely write Robertson off. Not completely anyway. Trevor Ariza at 5,500. I like this spot for Ariza. He get you 30 points. I think that's fine in cash. No problem with using Ariza here. At power forward, Taj at 3,900. This is hopeful for me. Hopefully they go, Taj, mate, can you play 30? Yeah, sure, let's go. And if he does that, then at 3,900, it's a no-brainer. Will they continue to keep Domantas Sabonis in the rotation? Will they continue to give 18 minutes to Jeremy Grant? That's unknown. But Taj should be playing 28. He should be playing 30. And at 3,900, he smashes that value. But until we hear or until we see it from Donovan, using it in cash is a really tough proposition because if he plays 17 minutes or 20 minutes, then he probably doesn't get there. But it is very dependent on what Donovan does. At power forward, Enes Kanter. Yeah, I don't love this for Kanter, so I'm not really keen on using him here. And Ryan Anderson is always just a tournament guy. At center, Steve Adams. I think this is a great spot for Adams to bounce back, play some extra minutes. He's played well against the Rockets and Clint Capella this year. At 4,700, I've got no problem. At 44 on DraftKings, knock yourself out. He is an option aside from the Marcin Gortat if you want to go cheap center. I do really like him there. Nene, I think, gets some minutes for the Rockets. He's at 4,600. I'm not sure he plays enough to break through that barrier, but the fact that he will get extra playing time limits what Clint Capella can do. Now, I love Capella, but he's going to need 28 minutes at 5,800 to really bring that value home, and I'm not sure he's going to be able to do that, unfortunately. If we see him playing 30 a night, Capella here, then I love it, but I just don't think that's the direction that D'Antoni is going to move in. All right, let's move on to the picks of the day now, talk about those. On FanDuel, we've got Beverly at 49, Rondo at 6,000, and Isaiah at 82 with all the caveats that I mentioned before. Big Eric Gordon at 43, Avery Bradley at 58, and Jim Harden at 12-2. Mo Harkless 36, Trevor Ariza 55, and Jim Butler at 10. Power forward Taj Gibson 39, Markieff at 55, and at center Steve Adams 47, Robin Lopez 5,000. So as you can see, spend your cash at the 1, at the 2, at the 3. The cheap value comes at the big man spots. On DraftKings, Marcus Smart at 49, Rondo at 6,000, and Johnny Wall at 97. Alex Abrines is someone who I didn't talk about. He is at $2,000. Now, if he has to get out there and it becomes a 3-point shootout and he plays 20 minutes and hits 5 threes at $2,000, if at $2,000, if he gets 10 points, it's 5x value. 10. If he gets 18 points, it's 9x value. That is stupendous. That is just ridiculous value. Now, I probably should have, so I'm going to backtrack and I'm going to talk about Abrines here, because at $2,000, that is just an insane price. Really, when you think about it, $2,000. His last game, he played 18 minutes and had 21 points. There's 10x value. Over his last 3 games, he averaged 16 points. Fine. Over his last 5, he averaged 11.5. fine at 2,000. So if you're stacking up on big names, Abrines at 2,000 is just stupidly cheap. Now, do they keep him out of the rotation entirely in favour of McDirt? They might, but that hasn't been the pattern of Donovan running things. Will he play 7 minutes? That's a risk too. But in a tournament, how hard is it for him to get 7x value? It's easy. How hard? He could get 15x value, and it wouldn't be a complete surprise. And that is a massive, massive start to really building your lineup. So back to those DraftKings picks. Braddles Beal at 72 and Jim Harden at 12. At small forward, the blue swimmer Alan Crabb at 41, Jay Crowder at 59, and Kevin Durant at 88. Dave West at 2,400, Mark Keefe at 5,000, and at centre, Marcin Gortat at 41 and Dwighty Howard at 68. On DraftStars, I didn't have any NBA contests up when I was doing this. I don't know if there's any up there now. Moneyball 5,700 for Marcus Smart, Russell Westbrook at 13.6. At shooting guard, Robertson 42, Bradley 57, Avery that is, and Jim Harden 12.3. At small forward, Torian Prince 37, Trevor Ariza 56, and Kevin Durant 96. Taj at 37, Draymond at 67, and at center, Gortat at 48, and Robin Lopez at 5,100 dollary dues. Before we go, let's do a check-up to see on Rudy Gobert to see if anything has happened with him. Nothing since I mentioned it earlier. Several reporting Gobert didn't tear ligaments. Here we go. Several reporting Gobert didn't tear ligaments, bone bruise, and hyperextension. And this is Matt Peterson tweeting. This is code. It's the same injury as KD. He's not coming back. So yeah, remember that. That is the same injury. I completely forgot that is the exact same diagnosis that Kevin Durant had, except he had the MCL tear. So we're not seeing Gobert. Definitely, I reckon, this week, and we'll see what happens after that. But at least there is no MCL tear, so that is a benefit for Gobert. As we move forward, and obviously as we hear more, we will update it. We are done here, guys. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball. Same on Instagram and on Facebook at facebook.com/redrockbasketball. Subscribe wherever you find this podcast: iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn. Subscribe to the podcast. Leave a review. We are done. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.